Now it's finally time to take a look at Premium for Astral Force.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another episode of the Road to Nextage, and as said in my previous episode, today we're gonna take a look at the Astral Force cards, but this time with a lens of Premium. And at first glance, you might not suspect that this set has a lot to offer for Premium, because it's all about Chrono Fang and the whole gimmick of Chrono Fang is changed. As the moment they revealed that Astral Force is gonna feature Chrono Fang Tiger and Rebellion as the main units, everybody was expecting about this new bind mechanic, as the old Chrono Fang from the G era was all about binding stuff and then calling things from their bind zone and multi-attack and have some strong powers, and that would synergize very nicely with Lost Legend and Mystery Flare because they also function around the bind zone. But then they showcased that the new Chrono Fang is all about discarding cards and having less amount of cards in hand to get a lot of power. So when they revealed that, there was the inkling idea that this would not combine very well with Premium, and we would have yet again a support wave like Lost Legend where it somewhat is alienating with Premium, and it's all going to be super wacky to incorporate Premium cards with the ZTB engine and Time Leap and that kind of stuff, even with Chrono Fang with the new cards. But now that we got all the reveals, we are actually pleasantly surprised with the type of interactions we can add to the Premium landscape for Gear Chronicle to come up with some interesting upgrades to old builds or concoct new type of deck strategies. And today we're going to take a look at the basics interactions that come from these cards, and as well give an inkling idea of what type of builds you can make with these new cards, but only the basics, as with Premium, once you start going into a certain subject, you can talk about for hours and hours and hours on hand. So in this video, I only want to cover the basics, so you can use this video as a jumping platform to start experimenting with your own type of strategies, combos, and all kinds of crazy interactions. So first, let's talk about one, and to extension another card that is in general sense amazing for Premium, as it allows us to fix one of the biggest issues of Gear Chronicle, and that is early game pressure. And that's all thanks to Steam Scara Irkab, or as we usually said, Irkabu. But the official translation isn't out yet, so depending on how they're gonna translate, it either is Irkab or Irkabu. But this card is basically our Blaster Dark that's better than Blaster Dark. It gives us early game pressure, as we can have twin drive grade 2s, even triple drive grade 3s, and all kinds of crazy things. But it can even be more than that, as it also is a stride fodder, which is pretty nice for Premium, as you want to stride as consistently as possible. But the fact that we can now play a grade 2 game, or at least have some pressure in the early game, makes all our late game combos, like the whole ZTB multi-tech engine or just the ZTB draw engine on your first stride turn, but even Time Leap itself, a lot more consistent, as now we can go into those plays with possibly your opponent already at 3 or 4 damage, as usually Gear Chronicle starts to only do things the moment they ride to grade 3 and start striding, but in those situations our opponent is sitting at only 1 or 2 damage. With this grade 2, it fixes that completely. But also what's great about this card is it does synergize with strides, as well as it can give strides a lot of extra drive checks, which is an awesome pressure tool. But it can be amazing, and I've already speculated about this card, if we get a restender like Gear Next, and this can work with Gear Next, but hopefully if we get another restender, this thing can be some insane pluses you can generate, as the extra drive check will attain until the end of turn. So if your Vanguard can restand, you get 2 extra drive checks out of 1 discard in the counterblast, which translates to a direct plus, but it's also 2 extra drive checks, which can be 2 extra draw triggers, heal triggers, crits, and all that kind of goodness which you want to pressure your opponent. And if you combine this with Gear Next, you could potentially have a Gear Next that has 7 drive checks and then restands with another 4 drive checks or something like that, which is nuts if you think about that. But with that in the same vein, we have another great one that is somewhere similar to like that. It's Steam Composer Il Kagina, which gives the Vanguard an extra 10k, and that can stack with the fact that if it restand, it attains the power as it until the end of turn. So these 2 cards are a nice addition to make restanders all the more viable and all the more stronger, even in Premium if we get better restanders. And with Premium Collection Volume 2 on the horizon, that might be something that actually be the case. And I'm gonna go over that in a future video, as I have my own suspicions of what this new Gear Dragon is going to do for Gear Chronicle, or at least what I hope it's gonna do. But another card that allows us to play some good early game within the premium landscape, not so much a standard, is the new Chrono Tiger Grade 2, that if we sit on that thing, we can get a cycle each and every single turn. This might not sound that amazing, but in a format where Grade 2 gaming is a thing, this ability might actually be major, as you can now get maybe 2 uses out of that Vanguard skill, as you are going to stay on your Grade 2 turn 1 turn longer in certain matchups. So it can have some more utility options to it. It can help you fix your hand. It can also help you to sustain the Grade 2 gaming, as you need multiple Grade 2s to put out the offensive, or you need more defensive cards. With the fact that you get some free cycles going, it can help you with that aspect. So the Grade 2 Tiger, as well as this Grade 2 Steam Scara, can help Gear Chronicle to have a better early game, which is what's lacking completely in Premium, but also late game options. But now let's dive into actual combos that we can do, and let's start off with one of my favorite decks, and that is Gear Chronicle's Time Leap. So, one you probably already are very familiar with I believe episode 4 or 5 of this series, where I talked about the new Gear Colossus Grade 3, Singing Dance Grace Colossus, which basically gives all our attacks for the entire turn a Battledore effect. If you combine this with the whole Time Leap engine, it can be insane, and you can use it in 2 different ways, as this card can be just placed from hand in your main phase to start off the turn, where every single of your attacks is going to have the Battledore effect. This will be very effective if your opponent is already at 4 or 5 damage. But, as I just stated at the beginning of this video, is that Gear Chronicle usually tend to go off when we go stride, and this is more true so with Time Leap. So it's very likely that the moment that we go into our main phase, our opponent is still sitting at 2 damage. So this effect won't have that much use out of it. But we can also flip it around, and the fact that this card exists might give our opponent extra incentive to maybe guard our first few attacks, if they can still guard with 1 attack, so they can save up hand, instead of just letting those attack hits. Because if they let the first couple of attacks hit, and they don't get the defensive trigger, and they suddenly are at 5 damage, and we then Time Leap into this thing, because we can just get it out onto the board whenever we like, then they are into a big pickle. So they might think, you know what, I know this card exists, there's a highly likely chance that he runs it, so I'm gonna guard a couple of attacks. And that helps also with the issue that 1 defensive trigger can stop Gear Chronicle, so the more early attacks they're gonna guard, the more value you're gonna get out of your multi-attacks, because they're now wasting their hand to guarding attacks that they might not even have to guard, just by the fact that the existence of this card can make those other plays look bad. But just the existence of this card opens up a very interesting psychology aspect to Gear Chronicle's Time Leap build, as now your opponent needs to think twice of what they actually want to do, and it's not just a simple cookie cutter solution or answer. Now, another thing that's interesting with the Time Leap build is the new Grade 2 Steam Engineer Shulia, that when it's discarded can call itself in rest. On the first glance, this card doesn't really look like much. You're like, yeah, it can recall itself for discard, but what do you attain from this? Well, if you combine it with certain specific cards, it actually can amount to a lot. Because what you can do is you can have Steam Sniper Lishma behind your Vanguard, and at the end of the battle that it boosted your Vanguard, you can resolve her. But to resolve Lishma, you need to discard a card. So you can discard this Grade 2, Time Leap her into something, and in this case, specifically Delayed Blazer Dragon. And yes, Delayed Blazer Dragon needs to have a Chrono Jet Vanguard, but we're going to get Chrono Jet, so we can do this combo the moment the trial deck comes out. We can call Delayed Blazer, then we can resolve Shulia's ability, so we can recall her from the drop zone onto the board in rest position. But now we have another Grade 2. So now we can activate Delayed Blazer's ability to Time Leap the rested Shulia into another Grade 3. So for 1 Soul Blast of Steam Sniper Lishma, you added 2 extra standing units. A Delay Blazer that's going to attack and another Great Free that's going to attack. So that can extend your multi-attack combos to some interesting degree. And this might not work with the latest edition of the Stride Zone from Premium Collection, as that is already unattacked time leaping stuff. But if we're going back to the Chronojet playstyle and we're going to use Nextage and Gear Groovy again, there's going to be a moment where we're going to attack with our Vanguard, which will not result into extra time leaping units. So in that case, this combo can extend your attacks with 2 extra attacks for the cost of 1 Soul Blast, because the discard will go back onto the field, which will then turn into another attack, which is actually pretty nice, because that's a lot of value you're going to get. But the story isn't all about Tiny, because we did get Chronofang support. However, this Chronofang might not be the Chronofang that you need for the actual build, but with the addition of Renovate Winged Dragon, which I talked about in, I believe, episode 7 of the series, when I talked about everything about this card can do a lot for not only Standard with the Turbo Mystery Flare build, but it can do a lot for Premium as well. Because I already explained about that this card can help you turbo out extra Bind Zone cards, which is a good thing for the G-era Chronofang Tiger build, where it wants to have a lot of cards into the Bind Zone, so you can get either multi-attacks going on, or get a lot of power to something like your Rebellion Stride, or like Steam Tamer Nani, that gets more power the more cards are in your Bind Zone. This card helps with that as well. Also, this card can combine with Steam Tamer Nani, as it can bind the Nani in the main phase back into the Bind Zone, and then you can then recall it during the battle phase to have some extra multi-attack going on as well. So there are some nice combos between those cards, as well as the rest of the whole Tiger engine. But this card also helps the Gear Colossus engine with the ZTB Demiurge build, where you want to bind 12 different ZTBs to then use Demiurge to restack your deck with only triggers, get the most value out of all your drive and damage checks. With this card, you can accelerate it even more, because you have a lot more control over what you're going to bind, as you can bind 2 specific ZTBs and then check the top 3 and get another ZTB of that to the Bind Zone, and then recall 2 other ZTBs or other cards that can maybe have an on-place effect that can then combo off into another extra binds or another extra abilities that can then help you progress your game state for Demiurge. Renovate Winged Dragon is a centerpiece of that strategy. But there are some extra interesting interactions and combos with the premium cards, because one throwaway interaction that you have is with Meow Meow Worker, a old grade 1, that basically can put itself in the Bind Zone and gives you a cycle for a discard, then draw something. If we combine that with Chrono Tooth or Steam Engineer Shulia, then that cycle can be turned into a plus, because it is resolved at the end of the turn. So calling a unit in rest isn't really that bad, because you're not going to attack anyways. So then that discard can be turned into a rested unit at the end of your turn. You got the draw of it, and then next turn you can stand them and you can basically use them to the full capacity. And there are many of those small intricate combos or interactions between cards, but not everything is that noteworthy to explain or talk about, because most of them aren't going to be really relevant or aren't going to be actually used in any shape or form. But at least now you have a basic understanding of what type of cards can work with the premium cards you already have access to us from the G-era Gear Chronicle cards, and what type of strategies might arise or might not arise. Because we got some Time Leap support, we got some Chronofang support, as well as ZTB support, but I think the only actual builds or things that can come out of this is just the general support. And what I mean with that is Team Scara Irkab, that helps Gear Chronicles early game as well as late game to a significant degree. That card is going to make the biggest difference for Gear Chronicle. Not so much the direct support for Chronofang or Colossus or Time Leap, because that's still in its infancy, especially Time Leap, as I think Time Leap is only going to come off its legs the moment that we're going to see Chronojet back, and depending on what support Chronojet is going to bring within the trial deck or with the Nextage set. So for those decks, I think it's a little bit too early, but Gear Chronicle is starting to get some more waves going in premium thanks to the awesome generic support that they got within this set. But this is just the beginning of the story, as we're just halfway through the road to Nextage. And that's where we end this episode, as this is everything that we can talk about for the premium side for Astral Force. Let me know in the comments down below if you have an interesting idea or an interactions with the new cards from Astral Force with the old G-era premium cards for Gear Chronicle, as I probably overlooked a certain interactions, as there are always endless possibilities possible, especially with an engine like Time Leap where you can do all kinds of crazy combos. So let me know in the comments down below what type of combo you have found or what type of strategy you're trying to build, and maybe some people in the comments can help you finish those ideas or a spark of interest into a different strategy, as that's all the fun about deck building in Cardfight Vanguard. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then why not head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!